Hi, everyone. Welcome to our From Compliance to Capacity Understanding the CSBG Organizational Standards webinar. We are pleased to have all of you join us and kind of set the stage for how we go from just complying with the organizational standards to really helping them become a management tool for our organizations and thinking about how we can go beyond compliance and towards excellence. I am Terry Bearden. I am Project Director for Organizational Capacity Building here at the Community Action Partnership, and I'm joined by our esteemed director, and I will let her say a couple of words.
Hi, everyone. Mary Beth Shaper, REMREV. I'm the Director of Organizational Capacity Building here at NCAP. I've been in the Community Action Network for the last 16 years, and had the joy of working in the network just like Terry both before the organizational standards and after the organizational standards. And really excited to spend some time with you all today. It'd be really helpful to know in the chat if y'all want to say hello and how long you've been in the network. That would be really helpful information for Terry and I as we're going today. And Terry, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks, Mary Beth. As always, we would like to ground ourselves in the promise of community action. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And we really encourage you to really lean into that promise of community action as you go through your day-to-day work. It can really help us to stay grounded and help us to remain focused on the reason that we do the work that we do. In addition, I'd like to ask you to put your name and agency in the chat and mention that we will make the recording of today's webinar available to you as well as the slides. We're going to be sharing a lot of resources with you, and so we want to make sure that you have information after our time together so that you can access all of those resources. Let's get started. All right, so first, I'd like to invite you to shout it out or maybe drop it in the chat if you don't want to come off of mute just yet. What is one word that you use to describe the CSBG organizational standards? Come off mute, put it in the chat. What do you think of when you think of the organizational standards? I'm seeing a lot. Foundation, structure. Okay, what else? Guidance. All right. Anybody want to come off mute? Guidelines, structure, clarity. Oh, that's a good one. That's a nice one. All right. So I'm not hearing a lot of horror words, horrific words coming out of there. So that's good. That's good. Sounds like you're on board. You understand the importance of community, the CSBG organizational standards. And so that will get us good footing for our time together today. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to talk about. Our agenda for today is we're going to do an overview of the CSBG organizational standards. Mary Beth is going to talk to us about that piece about moving from compliance to capacity. And we have, again, tons of tools and resources that we want to share with you as well. So when we think about the CSBG organizational standards, we need to understand really where they come from, right? So what you're seeing is our Community Action Network theory of change. And this really guides our network in terms of our national goals. We have 3 national goals that you see across the top of the graphic here. Those goals are supported by the services and strategies that we deliver. But it's really that lower right corner that we're going to focus on today, the performance management piece of our network. So let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at our performance management framework. So when we think about the performance management framework, there are really two parts. We want to talk about how well did our network operate, and that's where the local organizational standards come into play. There are also state and federal accountability measures, as well as ROMA, results oriented management and accountability system. So that talks about how well we operate. And then we want to, of course, measure the difference that our network makes through robust results. And those are measured by our national performance indicators for families and our national performance indicators for communities. So it's really that how well did the network operate lens that we are looking through when we are examining the organizational standards. Some of the key points that we want to bring forth about the CSBG organizational standards. It's important to recognize that these standards were developed by the network. They're developed for the network to ensure that we have a way to really fulfill our missions and that we have the capacity to operate as efficient and effective organizations. There are direct links between the CSBG organizational standards and the CSBG Act, um, Office of Management and Budget Guidance, federal laws and regulations, and really the organizational standards are grounded in good management practices and the values of community action. Um, they've been around for a while now. They were implemented in federal fiscal year 2016. So when you think about the CSBG Act, the last time the CSBG Act was reauthorized was in 1998. So if you read the CSBG Act, you're not going to see the organizational standards in there, but we have been working to comply with them for almost 10 years now. So when we think about how are the organizational standards organized, they're really organized into three thematic groups. We have the maximum feasible participation, vision and direction, and operations and accountability. So when we think about maximum feasible participation, this is our consumer input and involvement, right? Our engagement with our communities and our community assessment, which helps us to determine the strategies and approaches that we are going to utilize as we seek to meet the needs in our communities. For vision and direction, that's our leadership piece, right? That's our organizational leadership, our board governance, and of course, the strategic planning that our leadership engages in to set the direction for our organizations and to help us to achieve our missions. And of course, we always want to be accountable. So we have our human resource management, financial operations and oversight, and data analysis. And so when you think about those three groups, you can see that the organizational standards are a comprehensive framework for us to be able to measure our compliance with rules, regulations, and the other standards. Important to note that the community services block grant is just that, right? It's a block grant. So that means that the federal government provides general guidance to the states, but then it's up to the states to really administer that block grant funding and to provide oversight to grantees, community action agencies. So the states, therefore, are responsible for providing that guidance and for assessing our compliance with the organizational standards. So therefore, the implementation, the guidance, and the assessment of the organizational standards may differ from state to state. It's important to recognize that your state is your go-to entity in terms of any questions, and we'll emphasize that throughout our time together because there are going to be some changes, some differences in terms of how your state office is going to want different standards to be documented because they are intentionally broad. And so that allows that flexibility for each state and each local community action agency to be responsive to local needs. And so therefore, you may need to have some different ways of documenting that you are meeting the standards. In terms of what documentation is required, we intentionally, there are no prescribed documents that are required. So these requirements are really set up by your state. And there are lots of ways that your states can assess the organizational standards. So you really want to familiarize yourself with your state's timing, with your processes, and with the guidance that your state office is providing to you. So just to reiterate a little bit, states determine if the standards are met or unmet, right? They're the ones that are responsible for assessing your compliance with the standards. There's no partial credit. You either meet it or you do not meet each standard or you do not. There are some differences, though. We have public community action agencies and private community action agencies. There are no additional standards for public community action agencies. And really, the differences that do exist between the public standards and the private standards, it really typically reflects the differences in the way that public community action agencies are administered, what their administrative processes look like. Um, the CSBG organizational standards assessments really just verify the presence of a process or a deliverable. The standards don't speak to the quality of those processes or deliverables. It's like, is it there? Yes or no. Um, and all standards are not created equal. There are some standards that are tied to legal requirements. And so there may be additional consequences if those particular standards are not met. And it's important to remember that the organizational standards are really only a piece of the often complex compliance picture for community action agencies. We have a lot of requirements. Um, it's important to recognize that these CSBG organizational standards are separate from your CSBG contract monitoring. Head Start has its own standards, for instance. But it's important to recognize that the CSBG organizational standards compliance is really foundational to your identity as a community action agency. And meeting these requirements is really important for organizational stability. And so I'm going to turn things over to Mary Beth, and she's going to start talking about compliance versus excellence.
Thanks, Terry. So, friends, as we're going, if you have comments, questions, please put them in the chat, raise your hand. Terry and I want to be responsive to your needs here. And so I think Terry did a really nice job of queuing up a few really important points. You heard the organizational standards really assess the presence of an item, not necessarily the quality of that item. And that is that you can do a practice that is identified within the organizational standards, and it still not be to the best of your ability, right? Um, and really, at the end of the day, when we're only looking at compliance, is compliance really enough for your organization to be the best that it can be to fulfill its mission and its purpose? And I've asked this question in a lot of different rooms. I have to tell you, no one has ever said, yes, compliance is just enough for us. And the reality is that we are in this work not because we want to check boxes. We are in this work because we want to change lives. We want to make a difference. We want to fulfill our missions. And so for us to do that, we have to go beyond compliance. And so on the next slide, just want to introduce this idea that the organizational standards really, if you reframe the way that you see them from only a compliance requirement, an action, a thing we have to do every year because the state tells us we have to seeing them as a building block for organizational capacity, that can be a very powerful shift in our minds in the way that we treat the organizational standards. And I think unlock some of their magic, if you will, because the organizational standards that you see in front of you were not trumped up by accident. They were deliberately built to identify those key practices and core capacities that we believe all community action agencies need to be able to fulfill their mission. And so if you only do these practices to the bare minimum, right, to check the box, you're really missing the opportunity to be the best version of your agency that you can be. So on the next slide, I just want to give you kind of a framework for the two ways that you can think about this, right? So you can think about the org standards in a compliance view, a checklist, an accountability view of, how quickly can I meet that minimum requirement? None of us have ever done that before, right? How do I check that box for oh my God, the state is coming in and they're going to monitor me and I have to hurry up and do that. The one-time proof of documentation, where can I get that piece of paper and store it? How do I avoid the risk and assuring accountability today, right? And look, compliance is critical. I don't mean to undermine the value or importance of compliance, but my point is that there is another kind of level beyond just meeting compliance that I think really opens us up to being our best selves. And that's really a capacity view. And so if we look at the organizational standards through a capacity view lens, we can see them as an opportunity to think about how can we build a system that makes sure that we can always do this process the same way and perform well over time, right? Not just do a community assessment, but do it consistently over time to make sure that we're fulfilling, the intent of that standard. How can we embed the best practice into our agency culture? So not just trying to hurry up and check the boxes here and then, figure out how we might do it again next year, but that the way that we do business just includes those very best in class practices. Seeing the opportunity for an ongoing process of strengthening our operations, and really going, beyond that risk avoidance to seeing resilience and readiness to respond. And then also, lastly, just positioning ourselves for effectiveness and impact. So those are kind of two lenses that you can use when you're looking at the organizational standards. And it might be helpful to kind of think about, the when you're looking at the standards, kind of what lens am I viewing this through, right? Because like first and foremost, you do have to make sure that you are compliant, right? You do need to start there. You kind of can't go into the capacity view if you don't have basic compliance. But just starting there, I think can be very helpful in calling out, are we in compliance mode or are we in capacity mode? That's kind of a first step that you can take. So I just want to show you an example. Standard 4.5 on the next slide. This standard requires you to have a written succession plan in place for your CEO or executive director, has to be approved by your governing board, and it has to have provisions for, if you have a short-term unplanned emergency absence, as well as a process for filling a long-term vacancy. It's fascinating to me. This standard has been in place for, I don't know, this standard started in 2016. So organizations have, been required to have succession plans for the last 10 or so years. And yet, how many of us know an organization, one of our friends, one of our colleagues, maybe it's ourselves, who, when our executive director departed, we heard, well, we didn't have a succession plan, and so we weren't prepared for this transition. And that right there tells you that uh, we've been leaning into this, or those organizations maybe leaned into this as a check the box compliance. We have a plan on paper, but we don't have a sustainable practice that serves our organization well, right? And so the invitation to you here today, and to take back to your organizations, the challenge to take back to your organizations is to stop the, how quickly can we check the box, get the piece of paper together, but to move beyond that and to start asking ourselves, what would it look like if we did this to the best of our ability and really fulfilled the intent of what this standard is seeking? And leaning in there is going to allow you to unlock that next level. And that's really on the next slide. So how you build this capacity then, and how you can unlock this capacity building lens is by starting with that self-assessment. Don't stop at standard met. Let's move on. What would it look like if we were doing this to the best of our ability? And when you ask that question, you're going to be able to find gaps and build plans for improvement. Um, and so if we tried this together, this is the interactive part. So everybody warm up. I want to acknowledge, James, I see your question. I'm going to pick that up when we get to the end of this section, okay? But let's get everybody warmed up. We want to look at two standards, and I want to ask you, what would it look like if we did these things to the best of our ability? So let's just look at standard 1.3. Standard 1.3 says the organization has a systematic approach for collecting, analyzing, and reporting customer satisfaction data to the governing board. So, okay, the standard is telling us we have to have a way that we collect customer satisfaction, that we analyze the data, and we report it. Pretty straightforward. What do you think it would look like if you did this to the best of your ability within your agency? What would you do beyond what this standard requires? What else would you be doing? What else might you be doing? Getting actual customer testimony. Yeah, Judy, I mean, right? Maybe it's not just, hey, here's a customer satisfaction survey for you to take, right? But uh, really getting the voice of the people that we serve to inform then our approach to customer satisfaction. Because you're not just doing this, you're not just collecting this data for collecting data's sake, right? Kim, you're going right where I was going, right? You're going to prepare that annual report, and then you should be looking at it and then implementing improvements based on what you learn. So going beyond the standard is really where you're going to unlock that next level, right? Use the information for improvement in our programs. Fixing customer issues in real time. Ooh, instead of waiting until it needs to be reported according to the standard. Yeah, Olivia, that's a really excellent point, right? Not just kind of collecting data and then like letting it sit there, but consistently looking at it over time and using it to make improvements in real time. That's a really beautiful point. Yeah, sounds a whole lot like Roma. Okay, friends, you're doing pretty good at this. So let's look at standard 5.5. This is another one. Yeah, and Carrie said various methods to collect information from our customers, right? Not just the like, again, here's the static customer survey that you're going to fill out and you'll never see it again, right? But getting the voice of people lots of different ways. Okay, let's look at standard 5.5. This one says the organization's governing board meets in accordance with the frequency and quorum requirements and fills board vacancies as set out in its bylaws. What would you be doing to do this to the best of your ability? What would it look like to make sure that your board is meeting in accordance with the frequency and quorum requirements and filling your board vacancies as set out in your bylaws? What are some of the practices you think you might be doing to do this to the best of your ability? Constant recruitment to the board. Yeah, that is a really important part of this, keeping the board involved, setting standards, following a board calendar yearly and corresponding with the board frequently to ensure involvement. Right. So the requirement here, if you go back to like, what is the intent? What is the standard really trying to get us to? We want to make sure that our board is meeting, that they're talking on a regular basis. They're meeting as frequently as they need to. When they come together, they're doing so legally. And that they're not being that they have a way that they fill those board vacancies, because we know board vacancies are a major challenge for our organizations, and we can be our best selves when we're proactive about filling those board vacancies, right? When we're thinking ahead about, hey, how do we select new board members, or who are the next board members that we're going to have on our bench to move us forward. So yes, you all did a great job. In our organization, we have a constant list. Oh, I love a constant list of potential interested board members so that when a vacancy comes, we are filling the vacancy as best as possible instead of just trying to quickly fill. That's right. That's the difference between being reactive, waiting for the problem to happen and then responding, versus being proactive. When you're proactive, you have so much more control over the outcome than when you are reactive. I had a former executive director who said, the names of your next three board members should be in the top drawer of your desk. And I think that that was great advice for anybody who deals with a board, because we know our boards change with time. People are going to leave the board. And so the best way that we can be prepared is to know who's our next ask and what are the skills that we need in that next board member. Um, and then I really, Renee and someone else mentioned the board calendar. Renee and Sarah both mentioned a board calendar. I am a big fan of those calendars where you kind of know, okay, here are the key things that have to happen each month. That way you can be working backwards to make sure that you have the materials you need in time. So like, for instance, board election processes, they don't happen overnight, right? So if you know you're going to be doing your board elections in March, well, then you probably need to be, getting the information out in January and setting up the site for if you're going to do a community meeting where people vote, get that set up in February. So those calendars really, really make a difference and getting you prepared to know what's coming. Yeah, still getting better at that, collecting year round, not just scrambling at the end of the year. Sarah, when we talk about the org standards, that's something we bring up all the time, is to try to capture as much in real time as we can. That way you're not doing that end of the year scramble. And then the other thing that it allows you to do is ensure that any requirements are built into your process, because otherwise you're again, kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and some problems can be fixed in November, if your year ends in December, and some won't be able to be fixed in November if that's when you notice it. So go ahead and build out your calendar ahead of time. That's a great practice. So if you're wondering, well, where could I start with? What would it look like to do a practice within the organizational standards to the best of my ability? What would that look like? And you need a little bit of inspiration. We would love to point you to the best-in-class practices in community action, which are defined in our standards of excellence. And these standards of excellence represent 35 of the very best practices of the very best community action agencies. Couple of points I want to make about these practices. They are aspirational, but I will be clear that they are not unattainable. These standards are based in optimal real-world benchmarks that we know that all agencies can strive for and can achieve. So they are also adapted from the Malcolm Baldrige criteria, which is a national quality award for a variety of different sectors like nonprofits, healthcare, the public sector, for-profit sector. So we take those standards and we adapt them to community action, and they are built in collaboration with the network. So I say all of that to say, these are real world. You can look at these for guidance about what it can look like when a community action agency lives into being the best version of itself possible. So, all of this is to say, the standards, the organizational standards themselves are not standards of excellence. The organizational standards are the minimum requirement for community action agencies. And then you can move yourself towards these standards of excellence by reframing your thinking to not just how do I do the minimum, but how do I do the maximum? How do I be my best self? And so in that from compliance to excellence framework on the next slide, going beyond, hey, we have a tripartite board, check the box, to we have a board that is intentionally recruited, right? That reflects the skills we need. It centers lived experience. It reflects our community. We do a biannual risk assessment versus we do an annual risk assessment that informs our improvement plans and is tracked in our agency-wide scorecard. Or we have partners versus, we're systematically managing the way that we partner and thinking intentionally about who we partner with. So this is the invitation to you, is to go beyond just, yep, check, to how can we do this to the best of our ability. One of the ways that you can really build your capacity here and with both the organizational standards and I would say the standards of excellence too, is to embrace some continuous quality improvement too, right? Recognize that everybody can do better. All of us can do better. And so when we kind of start from that framework, You can be tracking your progress throughout the year with the organizational standards. And then look at your results year over year. Are you consistently doing really well in a standard? Are there some standards where you're really struggling over time? Year after year, you're finding yourself scrambling at the end of the year to find the documentation, or you've consistently missed a standard over time. So if you take this lens of not just how did we do this year, but how have we done over time, you can use that data to help you to improve for the future, to see if we have a pattern of we're constantly missing a certain standard, or maybe you're missing a certain type of standard. Um, to kind of stop and diagnose what is the driver of why we are consistently missing some of this. And then you can use that data to make, that improvement. In some cases, it's we don't have a good system for how we track our documentation. In some cases, it's um, maybe we've had a change in staff over time and we didn't have good um, uh, standard operating procedures, or we don't have things written down, and that has led us to miss some of our requirements. So, um, just want to invite you again to kind of take the moment, take the breather at the end of the year to stop and look big picture. How did we do, and how does this compare over time? And what can we do to be better next year? Don't just stop at, hey, that was painful and I didn't enjoy it, but actually, what can we do to make it better the next time? And so also when it comes to building your organization's capacity for the future, I love this idea of fold it in. If you know that joke, just fold it in, David. But really, if you can make the requirements in the CSBG organizational standards just part of how you do business, then you're not always scrambling to make sure that you've done the requirement. So, for example, in your strategic plans, right? There are a number of requirements in how or what your final strategic plan needs to look like. So when you're setting out your process for your strategic plan, start with what are the requirements that I have to meet and build your process with those in mind. Or your community assessment. Again, there are a number of sectors you have to gather data from. There's some specific things you have to do with the data, some data you have to look at. So when you're planning your community assessment, don't just do your assessment and then get to the end and say, oh, hey, have we met the organizational standards? But rather build it into the way that you design your process so that it is just done and you don't have to think about it. The more that we can just make it just how you do business, the easier it's going to be to ensure compliance over time. And so, and just one other point I want to make here too is that you can also integrate your assessment of, making sure that you met the requirements of the standards. Um, uh, by building it into like before you finish your community assessment, that you have a checklist that you run down and make sure, okay, have we met all of those requirements, or your strategic planning checklist. Don't wait until the end of the year to find out, oh, hey, we missed this requirement. Now we have to go back and do that. So, if you can have a simple checklist just to run down those requirements, that will be helpful to your organization. So I think I just have one more recommendation for you about how to reframe or how to build your capacity, and that is to reframe the standards. And I would say own them, but external requirements that check the box are so often how organizational standards are framed. And that is very different than these are tools that help keep the agency healthy and effective. So the way that we talk about the standards amongst ourselves and to each other really matters. And how we talk about them within the organization really matters. Do people hear these are, kind of a pain to deal with and they're just something that the state wants? Or do people hear the practices that are within the standards are really critical to our organization? And we can use them to be the best version of ourselves. And that will impact how people actually approach the work of the standards. So, um, how we approach them ultimately influences how they are seen and adapted and adopted by our organizations. And so I want to invite you to be thinking, or you could put in the chat or come off mute. What are some ways that you think you could ensure that the standards are seen as more than just compliance points within your agency? And maybe you found a way to do this in your agency, but are there some ways that you see that you can make sure that the standards are seen as more than just compliance within your agency?
I'll go.
Yeah.
I'm in the process. My name is Kim. I'm at Community
I
Service
can.
Programs of West Alabama. I've been here about August of 24 as the HR director, and we have a new executive director. So a lot of things are being revamped. And one of the things that I'm working on currently is updating our operation plan for just HR. And I just printed it, downloaded it, and so I'm working on doing the operation plan to include the regulations and the policies and procedures, and this all kind of tied within that. So I'm going to use some of the verbiage from the standards of excellence to include in my policies and procedures.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think that it works too for the org standards of excellence and the org standards that when you stop removing them as, hey, these are something extra or separate, right? Kim, what you're talking about is we're incorporating them into just the way that we do business. And so we own this. This is our standards. These are our standards, not someone else's standards. So I love that. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Other friends, anything else you would add? Other ways that you are trying to make sure the standards are seen as more than just compliance in your agency?
This is Renee.
Hey, Renee.
Hi, ladies. Hi, everyone. One of the things, and I was just putting it in the chat, that I found with doing the org standards for our agency is to get the whole agency involved in department heads at the beginning of the year. We've kind of gotten a system that we've been working at the beginning of the year. They know that they're going to get an email about from me in reference to our partnerships, updating that, various documentations that we need, information that we need from their department that may be part of some of the org standards. And I get them involved in that. And it's not just me asking them for information, but also asking them to give us feedback and to be also have them to participate in minutes meetings.
Mhm.
If there's anything that needs to be elaborated on concerning any documentation or any data that that department needs to provide us for any particular org standard.
That's beautiful, Renee. Well, part of what I mean, I love everything you just said. And one of the things I really love, you picked up on an important point. um, the standards don't just belong to Renee and your organization, right? You might be the cat herder who tries to figure out who does that or gets the documentation, but they're not Renee's standards, right? We're all responsible. And so when folks understand that, hey, you're going to be responsible for these three standards, I'm going to be responsible for these two, that really helps. And then it also says especially when you break it up over teams, it says, these don't just apply to kind of one section of our organization, or they're not just managements to manage. They really belong to all of us. And then I love the point about, getting feedback from folks, right? How is this going? How can we do it better? People love to give their opinions. And they also just really appreciate, the opportunity to be heard. And so I think that goes a long way. I love that. Katie also said making it a group effort and having complete buy-in. Yes, that opportunity, Renee, I kind of think you were going to this too, for two-way feedback and communication about them too, right? Not just, hey, here's the standards and good luck, right? But like, let's talk about them and let's dive in and get that opportunity for buy-in, I think is so critical. So I do have a few recommendations. I didn't just ask you blindly. I did have a few things I wanted to be sure that I shared with you, and y'all picked up on a couple of these. The leadership communication, the way that our leaders talk about the standards makes a big difference. Is it always your CSBG director who's talking about how important the standards are? Or, hey, executive directors in the room, are you talking about the org standards and how important they are? That matters really too. Who is seen as responsible? We just talked about that. Modeling that the standards are important, not just, kind of oh my God, the state's coming and we have to hurry up and get them done. But, are we consistently talking about the standards on an ongoing basis? Celebrating when you do well, right? This is especially true if you're doing change management, if you're trying to change the culture around the org standards. Part of what you can do to make any change management effective is when you have a win, you celebrate it because people like to celebrate, right? People like those wins. And so find those little opportunities to celebrate. Hey, we met 100% of our organizational standards. And don't just make it a leadership team celebration, but an organization-wide celebration. Or celebrating even that, the new process, everybody is doing the filing process or whatever it may be. And then last but not least, it's also the use, right? This is particularly important if you're gathering data from your team for the org standards, that they then be able to see how it is used, right? It's not just I'm providing you data and then I never see it ever again, but here's how we actually use it. Here's how it went into the state, or here's how we use the information you provide to make a improvement in our processes. So I love all of this stuff. So I see a couple of comments coming in by getting all the department heads involved in our org standards and the various documents that may be a part of the org standards. Yes, that's beautiful. Renee, that was the point, right? You came off mute and said that. It has become so routine. So it's a regular item that is done by everyone in the agency. And so it isn't a lot of work for any one person. Yeah. I feel like there were some days, and in some organizations, this might still be the case where it's kind of like one person's job to do the standards. And I really love seeing this kind of collective responsibility model. I think it goes a long way. We encourage agencies to see it as an opportunity to shine a light on their work and be cheerleaders for their agency. I love that too. That's great. So, colleagues, we are coming up on 15 minutes before the end of our session. We have a lot of tools and resources that we want to share with you to help you with preparing for the future and using really the standards to unlock your capacities. I think before I go here, I think I want to take a minute and circle back to James's question. And then friends, while I'm responding to James's question, if you have questions or comments, you could go ahead and put those in the chat. Don't leave just yet because we still have lots of things to share with you, but I want to circle back to this question. And again, this is your opportunity to get going with your own questions as well. In regions where multiple community action agencies operate in close proximity, how are differences in CSBG funded service offerings determined? For example, CSBG allows our agency to provide robust programming and services while neighboring CAAs serving the neighborhoods do not offer the same or similar supporting programs. Could you speak to the factors that influence why CSBG programs may be different between agencies, such as local needs assessment, funding priorities, administrative discretion, or allowable cost interpretations? Wow, James, that is a question, my friend. Wow. And it's a good question, right? No community action agency is the same. There are no two community action agencies that are exactly the same. Even though your organizations might operate in close proximity, I don't know about you, but like my neighborhood, my needs in this neighborhood are different than the neighborhood 15 minutes down the highway. I live in a city, so I'm just going to put that out there. So 15 minutes down the highway, that community's needs are very, very different. So community action was built on this philosophy and this principle that really agencies do their best work when they're in service to those local needs and those differing local needs, right? So it is built into our model that we should not all be the same, that we might all have the same end of the day purpose, right, to alleviate the causes and conditions of poverty, but that the way that we get there should be determined by our local conditions. by the local funding that's available, because again, just because you're two community action agencies doesn't mean that you both get the same kind of funding, doesn't mean you have the same capacities, doesn't mean that your boards are the same, doesn't mean that your focuses are the same. So really, the reason that your programs might be different is because that's exactly how it's designed to be, and it's meant to include the voices of your community in deciding that ultimate model. Terry, what would you add to that?
I would add that I needed to find my unmute button, which I I think that I think your point is well made, Mary Beth, and I think it's important to recognize that just because we're in close proximity, the difference between an urban and suburban community and a utterly rural community. I live in Arkansas, so the difference is literally a county line, and that can be the distinction between service areas. And also, I think it's important to recognize that the type and depth of community assessment that is done can lead to very different planning, even in communities that are similar or share similar economic situations. So perhaps organizations that do a more comprehensive community assessment and really understand how to combine that qualitative and that quantitative data to create a comprehensive picture of their community, they may have better information to use as they engage in their planning. So, it is really the one. If you've seen one community action agency, you've seen one community action agency. But I think it also may depend on the extent to which agencies use the really strong management tools and processes that are available to them.
Those are good points, Terry. And colleagues, if you have other thoughts or advice, I see Judy put in the chat, CSBG funds are meant to be flexible, right? And that by design, that is what they are meant to do, is be flexible to meet those local needs. The one other thought that I had too was the importance that partners play in that as well. So like when I worked at a local agency, we didn't focus on health needs. I'm not saying that health needs weren't a priority, but that there were other health partners who really covered those bases. And so it didn't make sense for my agency to lean in on that space, right? But there are other agencies in the surrounding counties who absolutely provide health services, and it's appropriate. It just, in our model, it didn't make sense. And then in some ways, because we didn't do that work, we weren't well positioned to do the work either. We weren't the experts in providing health services or anything like that. So yeah, that's a good question, good point. So friends, while we're going through some of our last points here, invite you to put questions in the chat, or did somebody come off mute? Does somebody have a question before we go ahead? Okay, I thought I heard someone had a question. So, oh, right, skill builders. I was like, where am I? Let me reorient myself. So, NCAP.
We can't hear anything.
Oh, can you hear me?
Power off.
Tiffany?
Okay. Okay, so folks can hear me. Very good.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. There might be a technical problem there. Maybe we can help with that. So, skill builder training. So we coming up here very soon, we have 2 skill builder trainings that are available for enrollment. If you are like really jazzed about the CSBG organizational standards and want to go deep on how can we build our capacity to meet the standards, how can we make this easier going forward, how can I get some help with a few particular standards I have questions about, the organizational standards skill builder might be a great space for you. So this training will take place over the course of 2 days from 1 to 5 each day. If that feels like a long time to talk about the org standards, I promise that Terry and I keep it fun, and you will enjoy your time in talking that much about the org standards. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback about this training and how it's helped folks to make sure that they're able to meet the standards going forward and help their organization, just their approach to the org standards. We also this year are going to be offering a community assessment skill builder. And this community assessment skill builder is meant to help you to plan out and think about your community assessment practices and build a stronger, more robust practice with your community assessment. So that training, again, virtual, 2 afternoons over the course of 2 weeks. There will be homework in between those 2 weeks, so do know that because we are going to want you to practice some of the data collection and data analysis stuff that comes with community assessment. And if you register for both trainings, there are discounts available, and Terry can help you with that. Also want to share that Pathways to Excellence, we did put the standards of excellence in the chat here. We talked a little bit about them. Pathways to Excellence is a great opportunity to take your agency to the next level. If you are interested in how can we be the best organization that we can be, how can we implement some of these best-in-class practices, and how can we build a culture of continuous quality improvement, Pathways to Excellence may be a good fit for you. You can enroll in the bronze tier of Pathways to Excellence at any time. And the bronze tier is really an opportunity just to learn about the standards and get some of your foundations in place. It's a really low risk engagement. The silver and gold tier engagements are a little more involved, and we have some materials about the tiers on our website, so you can check those out and make a determination if one of those might be a good fit for you. We will be enrolling for our fall cohort later on this year. If you are really eager to join our silver or gold tier cohort this spring, get in touch with one of us like by the end of the week, and we can talk to you about that. And if you're totally not ready to enroll, but you want to learn more about the standards, the standards are available for everyone to read for free on the website. If you want to go deeper into the standards and want some training on that, we do also have our Pathways to Excellence e-course that is now available to enroll in as well as an organization. So that is a new offering, and all of those details are on our website. So, okay. Terry, I think I'm going to pass to you to talk a little bit about tools and resources. And I just want to acknowledge that this is normally the part of the training where everybody drops off, because everybody goes, I know the tools and resources, I don't need to know where they are. And then when we do surveys about what do you need from NCAP, people say, you have so many tools and resources and we don't know where they are. So I'm going to encourage you to hang on and hear about some of the tools and resources that we have to help you with your org standards.
Yes. Thanks, Mary Beth. I did go ahead and put the evaluation link in the chat as well, because if you are going to leave us a little early, please make sure you grab that link and provide us with your feedback and ideas for other webinars. So let's take a walk through these resources. We have a lot of community action, of organizational standards resources pulled together on the website that I popped into the chat for the organizational standards. When you go to that page, you may think, well, this talks a lot about the past. Well, the reality is the CSBG organizational standards have not changed since we instituted them. So a lot of the resources that we have available are still extremely relevant. So let's take a look at what some of the resources that we have there are. So we have tools that the state assessment tools, samples of state assessment tools. And so we also have tools for community action agencies. Sometimes seeing what a state might use as guidance can be helpful to us as we think things through. We also have separate tools for private versus public community action agencies conducting their assessments. And then this guide does include the final language that was adopted. There's an assessment template that is included in the guide. There is a glossary of terms that can help to really understand the intent of the standards. And so, again, we're providing this information to support your work. And these types of tools can really be helpful if you are that point person for the CSBG Organizational Standards. And if you can share this kind of information with folks to build that buy-in across the agency that you guys were talking about, I think these tools can be very useful. You guys mentioned the calendar of required actions. We do have a guide and a template for that. Some of the standards are required to be assessed annually, every 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And so we have that for our organizations, as well as a calendar of board activities that when I was still working at the Arkansas Association, this was the most heavily recommended tool that NCAP had for org standards that I promoted. It's extremely useful and can help staff to understand not just when the board needs to take actions, but if your board needs to take actions on a particular date, well, that may mean that staff need to start working to compile that information, pull those resources together a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance. So having this board calendar of actions can really be helpful, not just to keep the board on track, but also to provide staff with guidelines for when things need to be done as well. Standard 4.3, this is the documentation that your organization uses a certified Roma trainer. And so the intent is really here that you are utilizing the knowledge-based Roma trainers and implementers to guide your Roma planning cycle. We have toolkits and webinars for each of the 9 categories. Again, if you're thinking about newer staff, folks that have come on board who may really benefit from some of this foundational knowledge, it's easy for us who've been around for a while to be like, oh yeah, we know that, we've done it, it's really good to go. But think about the newer folks and some of the folks who've not been around to really understand where the standards come from, as well as what the intent and purpose of the standards are. So these toolkits, as well as the webinars that are posted at the webpage, can be very beneficial to your staff. So that really are the resources we wanted to highlight today. When you get into our website, you'll see a lot more resources, and so I hope you will share that information. Again, it's really important for us that you take the time to provide us with your feedback. That's what we use to determine what kind of webinars and training sessions we will offer in the future, because we are here to really serve the network. And so with that, I'm going to open things back up and see if anybody has any questions. Well, thank you, Katie.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. This was wonderful. It's good to get feedback from other agencies and to just help us to einschauen for ein.
Thank you, Renee. That is our hope that we provide. This is kind of introductory information, but again, to hear from your colleagues, I think during these opportunities, that's one of the big benefits as well, because you're not out there alone. And if somebody else can figure out a better way, let's share that.
Right. There's too many smart people in this network for any one of us to suffer alone. So friends, if you're
That's right.
struggling with a thing, reach out, right? Reach out to your colleagues. If you don't know who to reach out to, Terry and I are always available. And we love to talk to anybody in the network. So please reach out. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. All right. Well, thank you very much. We will wish you a good day and great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you and goodbye.